Alrighty. So, just to introduce myself, I'm Josh Kochster. I was part of founding the SI Network about 8 years ago. Myself and Manali and others have been working on developing the hub for systems innovation here in the UK, based in London, for the past 3 years. We started just when the pandemic came, and it's been quite a journey since. We've done a lot of great events, from learning sessions to many meetups that maybe some of you have been to. We've did the first SI conference here about 2 years ago, and many other activities and events in between. We're all about how can we grow an ecosystem, a community, or the field of systems innovation in the UK. I'll explain why we do that in a minute. And so you'll hear from me, you'll hear from Manali also. She'll be helping us with the workshop there. She's my colleague, along with Sarah, who's not here this evening. We form the core team. We also have an extended team, and Daniela, who contributed to this paper. That's why I put her up there as part of the research and so forth. So that's us. The purpose, again, is to share with you the findings and have a conversation about this paper. So I'll just say it builds upon actually research we've been doing for the past 3 years since we started the hub. Actually, even before we started, I spent some time really trying to dig into what's going on here, particularly in London, but across the UK now. We actually have a second SI hub in the UK, which is quite exciting. The Bristol hub launched about 6 months ago with our friend Yasmin leading that. So now we're 2 hubs in the UK. And this started out as kind of a research project to really understand what's going on, particularly here in the London ecosystem, because personally, I think it's very rich. There's a lot of interesting things going on. And this paper was the first one we published, Growing London Systems Innovation Community, right at the beginning. And you're welcome to take a look at that. It's on our website. You'll find the link there if you've joined the Mirror Board. This also builds upon what we're doing with SI at the global level. This was the first State of Systems Innovation paper we published last year, 2023, kind of assessing things globally, because we have a lot of data. We're 25,000 members on the website. We have hundreds of thousands of followers at this stage. So we get a lot of data from that. And this paper was kind of compiling that to give some insight into what's happening globally in terms of the state of systems innovation. The UK version is kind of a scaled down one, particularly for the UK, and but really built upon that kind of a framework. Again, you'll find that there. There's the link there if you want to take a look into that. We'll be doing a 2024 version coming out in a couple of months also. So just to show you a little bit of what we've done in the past, so you get an idea of that. We've done a lot of maps to try and understand both the individuals and organizations working in and around systems innovation and what we call purposeful innovation also here in the UK. This is one of the first ones we did, again, with Daniela. She was doing a lot of the work around the data. She's a data scientist. This one here was actually collected about 250 different organizations in different areas working around purposeful innovation in the UK. And we represented that in terms of whether they're more transformative in the center there or more incremental out on the edges here, and then looked across economy, academia, social sector. The areas, the categories we used also for this paper that I'll be showing you today. It's actually different sectors, social sector, environment, so on and so forth. We'll look more into that as we get into the paper today. But that's kind of how we're thinking about it. You can see some of the really more transformative ones there in the center. But that was the collection of over 250 organizations that we structured like that. Again, you'll find the link there if you want to look at it. We have it on the Mirror Board. You'll be able to zoom in and take a look at what's going on there. So Daniela also produced this, which is a Kumu map, taking those organizations and then structuring them into different areas that you can see here. And you're welcome to dig into that. You'll find the map there at that link. That's a more interactive version also. That's a little bit of what we're doing. We've also been analyzing the members in our SI London Hub community. We're almost 1,300 members at this stage. And this gave us insight into what the members were interested in, what they were working in, and so forth. They actually self-categorized themselves when they joined the website and said, "Oh, I self-identify as," you can see the categories on the left-hand side here: innovators, designers, researchers, entrepreneurs, and so forth. And Daniela did some work to visualize that also. So you'll find the links there up above if you're interested and you want to take a look at that. But it's just to say what we're looking at today is kind of building upon that data. So there will be a chance to stop in a short while to hear any questions or comments you may have. So definitely welcome those. You're welcome to come into the Miro board and put them in down here. Once I've said a bit about the paper, we'll take pause, have a little conversation for any questions or comments you may have. If you're not able to join a Miro, Manali will be able to pick them up if you put them in the chat. So just to zoom in then on the paper, that was a little bit about kind of background data we've been collecting and what we've been doing over the past years. This paper started earlier on this year, and wanting to try and give a view of what's going on in the UK in terms of systems innovation, and really hoping over time to get some kind of visualization, some representation to help us see what's actually happening, because that can be very a powerful kind of window or picture onto thinking about how we develop and grow this, which is ultimately what we're interested in. So here's the paper. Yeah, the link is back here on the first one. If you click on that there, you'll find it on the website. It's intentionally quite a light document. We don't want to produce big, long reports that no one reads. So it's very light, just trying to get to the essence of what we want to cover. So here it is. It just starts off with a little bit of purpose why we're doing this. Some of the stuff I've already just covered there. Really explains what systems innovation is very briefly for those who aren't familiar with it. New systems-based approach to enabling change within complex systems. A more holistic approach looks at the overall dynamics and systemic conditions of issues. And rather than reducing down, it's about reducing down and doing innovation in parts, which is a lot of what we do. It looks more broadly at how we can innovate in systems and find new ways of thinking about the challenges, new ways of taking systems thinking and thinking differently about the challenges we face. Kind of going down the iceberg to examine the mental models, systemic structures, and so forth, and think about how we can innovate in those as a way to really transform systems. That's what we're talking about when we say systems innovation, systems change. And yeah, it's really trying to get away from this innovation in parts that we do a lot of, which is great, but it doesn't actually really help us when it comes to systemic kind of wicked challenges. A lot of what we have in the UK at this time, whether it's all of these, really, we have a lot of challenges in the NHS and healthcare, obesity, political paralysis, financialization, and many others, cybercrime, migration, food security, so on and so forth. These are very systemic climate change for the different local administrations and all of us really here in the UK. We need to think about how to adapt and respond more effectively to these kinds of challenges. What we see is a lot of kind of linear and reductionist approaches that don't serve us very well when it comes to dealing with complexity. And we're asking, is there a different way? Is the way we can build capacity for more systemic approaches to innovation and to change and to addressing these challenges? And this graphic kind of captures it. For a lot of people, I'm not going to give a big lecture about systems innovation today, but hopefully you're already familiar with all of this. It's saying linear approaches aren't really working for us, and we need to dig into the complexity and find new ways of addressing these challenges, new ways of thinking about them, actually new ways of working together. We need more of an ecosystem approach to these challenges. It doesn't work when we're doing it in isolation. New ways of collaborating, new kind of collaborative platforms and ecosystems. And that's part of what we're trying to develop and grow with our hub. So that's that. I imagine you're somewhat familiar with all of that already, and hopefully it's not too new to you, but it was just a bit of framing in the paper for those who are new to this. So then jumping into the question of assessment, how do we go about this? We're assessing for the level of development of the capacity for systems innovation across different geographies and domains in the UK. This is done based upon data we've collected from our community, from qualitative and quantitative sources. These sources here generally open web data. It's taken from our LinkedIn followers, about 4,000 of those. Questions we've asked people in our community, so polls and questionnaires. And our community members, as mentioned, there's about 1,300 of those in our group on the website, and people we talk to as we do meetups and different kinds of events and collected data there. And that's that. That's the data source we've used. There's many different ways of approaching this, right? How you go about assessing something like this, and of course we're aware that this is an emerging field, and that makes it very, very difficult actually. It's kind of unprecedented in some sense, right? No one's really done a state of systems innovation for the UK before paper, so we've got to figure out around, well, how do we actually think about that? How do you frame that that understanding of what's going on? What we've done here is two dimensions, right? One is by location, by geography, which is a relatively simple one. The second one we looked at was actually going into the different, we showed them there before. If we're thinking about an ecosystem, we're thinking about all these different actors coming from different domains, different sectors, and so forth. And that's kind of core to how we modeled and framed the whole assessment. You can see it here. We broke it out into these 8 different domains, and then looked across each of those to think about how developed is systems thinking and systems innovation in those areas. So that's what we're going to look at now in a minute. It's kind of the core to it. So firstly, just talk about geography and what we know from the kind of global level. So this is a heat map of where the SI members are on the planet. As mentioned, 25,000 of them. And in the global state of systems innovation paper, we looked into this, and it's quite clear that Europe, Northern Europe, is kind of an epicenter for all of this, and the UK actually sounds a bit self-serving and a bit egoistic, but it actually turns out to be quite an epicenter for systems innovation, along with a number of other geographies such as the Netherlands and the Scandinavian countries also. But you can see on this heat map that Northern Europe's quite prominent, and that's a bit of a kind of global context. And then looking inside the UK, you can see that a lot of members from London, as you'd expect, but across the other kind of main metro areas in the UK, you can see it here: Manchester, Bristol, Edinburgh, Newcastle areas. So that's a little bit about the geography of where the members are coming from, where the interest is coming from. And then zooming in, if you want to ask questions there, remember you can put them in the chat. You can write them down here. I'll get to them when we reach that stage. So just looking at this, then this ecosystem. In this section, we look at how developed the understanding practice of system innovation is within different domains. The graphic on the left is a somewhat qualitative illustration of the level of development of systems innovation within the domain we're assessing. In these coming sections, we'll look at. So from this, we'll talk about as we kind of walk through all these different sections now. Design was the one that popped out for us, where we see the most interest and maybe the greatest level of development for systems innovation. But also we've seen a lot of interest in public sector and social sector. A lot of systems change work has come out of non-for-profits, philanthropy and foundations here in London and other parts of the UK. And then there's quite a bit develops out of the whole environmental movement and academia. There's quite a bit going on in systems thinking there, not so much in tech and business and built environment and infrastructure. just to look at kind of zoom in on those a little bit, we broke each one out and looked at it. Design, as mentioned, was kind of the area we found the most interest coming from. London's kind of a well-known hub for all different kinds of areas of design. And systems thinking is present in different courses. There's much interest in the area of systemic design, however, not necessarily a lot of kind of understanding of what systemic design is and how that really works in practice. So the question for us was, how do we kind of build upon that? How do we turn this interest in systemic design into actual practice and actual, people being equipped properly with those tools and methods? We then looked at different organizations in here. This is actually coming out of the initial map you saw on the left-hand side there that Daniela did, the Kumu map, and which organizations are in this space. You've probably heard some of them: Design Council, Snoop, Design It, Method, and so forth. So that was a really promising area, the design community, with a lot of kind of interest coming from there. So I'll stay going. Public sector, also there's a lot of interest here at all different levels, from the kind of local boroughs and councils to the national level. In government and public sector at large, the UK again compares well with the rest of the world. I guess this is talking relatively or comparatively. The awareness of system thinking is relatively high, and the UK generally ranks in the top 10 for innovation. So a lot of this is kind of building upon what exists in terms of innovation capacity as we're talking about systems innovation. However, the public sector delivery is still rooted in industrial age logic, pushing out services and so forth, a lot of what we know. And how might we move beyond that to civil service that's kind of more complexity and formed ways of doing civil service and public sector generally. And those are some of the organizations. Again, you might recognize some of these that are in this space: UK Policy Lab, FutureGov, Human Learning Systems, States of Change, Centre for Public Impact, New Local Government Network. So there's a lot going on here, I would say. And I think it's a place where progress has been made. The government is becoming more receptive, accepting of the need for design and innovation-driven approaches. For example, the systems unit in the UK government, maybe you've heard of this, interdisciplinary team, policy analysts, strategy, and systems experts who support people in using systems approach. So that's that. Maybe you are working in this area and you know a bit about this. You might like to share some of it with us towards the end, but you can see there's quite a few organizations kind of working in and around systems change, systems innovation within that area. And to stay moving on, built environments. We didn't find as much here. UK has a lot of challenges around aging infrastructure. Government departments of infrastructure generally work in silos, creating disconnected systems. Too often the built environment is conceived in siloed projects without integrated consideration of the overall outcomes and quality of life. And the question is, how might we move to a systems approach to that, an integrated approach to built environment that connects across departments to better reflect the complexity of the systems we're dealing with. So here we looked at some of the organizations in that space. It's people working and organizations working around cities, infrastructure, built environments, and so forth. And some really interesting ones, maybe you know them, organizations like Project 00, Dark Matter Labs, Civic Square in Birmingham, and others also. And they're developing new ways to think about and develop the built environment from the perspective of civil space, and new ways to illustrate and grow public value. At the same time, design construction companies like a ROOP, which is a very large global design engineering company that actually has quite an influence, a team of system thinkers there, are using systems thinking and complexity theory to approach infrastructure and the challenges of climate change in new ways. There's other ones like connected places, catapults, and yeah, Royal Academy of Engineering actually is a really good example. Maybe you know of some of these organizations. They have quite a big influence from systems thinking at this time. I have a lot of conversations with them, participatory cities, so on and so forth. Yeah. Okay, so to stay going, environment. So this is people coming from the whole sustainability movement, which again has kind of deep roots here in the UK, that intersect with systems approaches along many dimensions. The desire for a more sustainable world is often more reactionary rather than innovative, often a bit piecemeal rather than systemic, and focused on changing policies for protection rather than innovating new pathways. So how might we move towards a discussion around environmental challenges that is better grounded in understanding of socio-ecological systems as a framework for collaborative action and assessment, develop platforms that integrate initiatives towards shifting systems, patterns, and outcomes. So there's a lot of I'd say interest and kind of history and so forth from the sustainability movement and so on here, but often the initiatives are quite piecemeal, I guess is what we're getting at here. These are some of those working in that area. I'm not sure it's as comprehensive as it could be, but Schumacher Institute, you've probably heard of these, definitely have a long history with systems thinking, from future resilient brokers, Center for Sustainable Development, and so forth. So more recently, ideas like donut economics. Yeah, a lot of interesting ideas have come out of the UK, like donut economics, which have gained popularity, explicitly grounded in a more systemic understanding of environmental challenges. So that's the environment. I'm going to stay going because we have a few more here before we get to questions in our workshop. Of course, all of this is in the paper, so I definitely welcome you to jump in there and take a deeper look. Social sector is an interesting one. So a lot of the systems change movement has kind of grown out of the whole non-for-profit philanthropy foundations here over the past couple of decades. So in some sense, the word systems change is quite well known in this area. Even may have become a buzzword at a certain stage. But a lot of charities are still caught in the paradigm of fixing problems with limited resources in a landscape of many small initiatives that lack coordination, while innovation capacity is again kind of lacking in this space, I'd say, at least from the conversations I'd have. How do we unlock, attract, integrate, and align capacities around key challenges? How do we develop better understanding of systems dynamics around these challenges, from which wicked social challenges emerge, build effective platforms for integrating across actors, and so forth? These are some of the organizations. Again, you've probably heard of them, or some of them: the Young Foundation, Children's Society, Darlington Service Design Lab, and Kelly Chase Foundation, and quite a few others there. And these are starting to, there's definitely a growing movement of kind of questioning the whole paradigm around charity and particularly philanthropy. Kelly Chase Foundation are closing down because they don't really believe in that paradigm anymore and are looking for something different. So there's been a lot of kind of questioning around the whole philanthropy foundation kind of paradigm, the foundations of that. And I think systems change approaches and systems thinking approaches are core to whatever comes next, and finding better ways to address these kind of social challenges we have here in the UK. So that was the social sector, and finally just looking at private sector, which in many ways hadn't been the most receptive, not as much as social sector or the public sector. System Thinking has generally found its way into business through its application to management practices. So there's a lot of people, a lot of systems thinking ends up as discussions around organizations and management practice and so forth. So I think in many ways it's found its way into organizations and then obviously into the private sector in that pathway. Um, However, a more holistic approach can be seen entering the world of business through the advent and growth of social enterprises, right? That's part of social enterprise, part of a kind of broader awareness about the influences and effects of organizations, a more holistic understanding of enterprises and businesses, and the growing demand for companies to consider their social environmental impacts. Coupled with this is the rise of business ecosystems as new networked ways for collaborating are developing. So this was just looking at some of those, both in finance, business, and yeah, the private sector generally. And there's a huge kind of movement in social enterprises and KICS community interest companies that's growing. And people like B Lab UK supporting that, Financial Innovation Snowball, and so forth. And that's that. Those are the ones we looked at in terms of the different areas, what's kind of going on there, what are the organizations there, and how do we see the development of systems thinking and systems innovation in those areas. So I'm going to pause there. That was a lot of talking, a lot of lecturing. I don't like to do too much of that. We'll maybe stop some questions in a second, but just to kind of bring this to a close here, this section, we finally had a little section around how we're thinking about growing or developing this field, because that's really the point of this, not just to assess the state of it, but try and understand how can we develop and grow this, and questioning the idea of what is a field? What do you mean by growing the field of systems innovation in the UK? I think there's two sides to that. It's a field of ideas and a field of practice. If we talk about innovation, it's the creation of new ideas, but then you're going to go out and you're going to apply those. And if we talk about an ecosystem, a community, a landscape, that's doing that across a number of different organizations and people and so forth. So it's really a network of organizations and people that are developing new ideas, learning those, sharing those, discussing those, and then going about trying to apply them in projects and different kinds of initiatives. So looking at that, like what are the different aspects involved there, and some kind of initial kind of map of what might need to be in place, how are these things affecting each other, what would a real kind of ecosystem where we're really, taking these ideas, they're helping us really look at these challenges in new ways, helping us collaborate and work together around those challenges in new ways. What would that really look like? And this is maybe a little bit of a map of the different pieces that need to be in place and how they might affect each other. So going to leave all my lecturing there for the moment. We'll, of course, qualify all of this by saying it's very early days. It's the first iteration. We hope to do this on a yearly or biannual basis so that we can stay developing it and actually get to a better framework, because it's really a first iteration, but quite pleased with just getting it together and really something just to have a conversation around what exists, how can we build and develop it. Actually, I was going to hand it over to you, Manali, wasn't I, earlier on, to welcome people to share their profiles.
Maybe we could, because we just finished the presentation, we could first take up the questions. Yeah, feel free to add in more. I think there were these couple of questions from John. I don't know if you want to speak through them, but yeah, I've just copied the questions from the chat. John is referencing to the ISO 56001 launching soon, and then the next question is followed up to it.
Yeah, anybody want to speak to their question here?
By John, if you want to expand more on those questions, John.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. Good to see everybody, and thanks very much for the paper and the presentation. Really, really excellent work and very useful. Maybe not time for introductions now, but I can do that another time if necessary. So real quick on the questions, I got a little bit carried away, I'm afraid. So the first one is ISO 56001 is the new innovation management standard, which has been out for 5 years already, 56,002, but the full one, the requirements, launches next month, and there's some BSI events. Maybe people are interested, maybe you're interested, maybe people on the call are interested in being aware. The whole point in the diagram there is it's a system. So that's the first thing. Obviously, Cynefin, people might know about that anyway, but context is key. And then I've just got a bit carried away with some of the other questions.
Okay. How are you incorporating context, Cynefin? Yeah. Need to discuss relationships and strength of, yeah, indeed. How do we build on previous innovation, non-systemic? That's a good question. Definitely one we've been thinking about. I think systems innovation does build upon an innovation economy that exists. So actually, it's an interesting point. Going back to, we look at the geographies here, and when we look globally at like where are the places where systems innovation are really developed, actually there's a very high correlation with places that are really at the top of the list in terms of innovation economies. Places like Sweden, which are right at the top, or even in Europe, if you look at the top 4 innovation economies like Sweden, Switzerland, and the UK is not far from the top, Netherlands and so forth, they're quite closely correlated with all of it. So it does build upon, and you really see that, London's really a hub for innovation, right? So it does build upon these things for sure, yeah. But the question is, how do you really build upon that in, a systems way instead of it being just a startup ecosystem? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just come back on that. So when you're introducing a new system, and it's great work, pardon the phrase there, it's easy to disregard the existing work, and obviously it's much more powerful if you can incorporate the previous work and build upon it. And it strikes me that because it's been more deductive and analytical approach, and I agree with you, and not connected, maybe part of it is to connect, and therefore the relationships are really strong. So when you have the clever systems of drawing lines between things, that's fine, but we need to focus on the metadata on the lines and what actually is that relationship, is that information, is it two-way? And in fact, probably the emphasis should be on the relationships rather than the parts and so on, and piece of work.
Yeah, it's a great point. But, it even starts right at the beginning in terms of how you frame this, the words you use, because in words you exclude and you include, don't you? So that's something we struggle with. We really started off with what's the best frame? Is it systems innovation? Quite often we use the term purposeful innovation because we want to be more inclusive. Maybe not everyone uses that word, systems innovation. So if we go back, here we frame this as purposeful innovation, so as to really try and spread the net quite broadly and see, well, what are the interesting things going on out there, and then of course you want to take people on a journey, don't you? It's like not exclude them, say you can be part of this, and how can we go on a journey to something that's more transformative, that's more systemic, and all of this. So we're definitely considering all of that. Yeah, thanks.
Great.
Noting. Anything else?
And does anybody else have any questions? We don't have anything in the chat, but if anybody has, maybe feel free to unmute if you want to add something on the mail board.
Yeah, responsible innovation is another one. Yeah. Have played around with quite a few of those words and maybe found purposeful innovation one of the best, because we have a lot of innovation, but it's not really directed to go anywhere except for making money and so forth. So it felt like purposeful might be the right word, because then it actually directs it in a particular way. But it's also the ecosystem concept of like, we can't do things with just our startup, just our organization. We've got to collaborate at a broader level is part of it too. And there's a lot of other ideas too, portfolio approaches and mission-driven innovation and so forth. Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
No, I don't think we have any other questions, but yeah, we could move on to just more having a collaborative part of the session, wherein maybe first we just wanted every one of you just to have a little introduction of yourself so that we get to know the diverse people who are there on the workshop, as well as maybe good to connect with each other. So if you, I hope everyone has the link and is on the mirror board. if you can see the introduction section over there, it'd be great if you could add your name, your area of work, and your organization, yeah, as it's applicable, so that we're just hoping this part of the session so that we get to know more each other, and the end goal is to understand areas of interest and eventually potential ways for us to collaborate.
Yeah, should we just take maybe 1 minute
Yeah.
to fill that out? Put a little timer here.
So we have someone from design, someone from innovation management. Okay, great. Is there anyone still left to write? But yeah, just as an overview, I see we have quite diverse people from quite diverse backgrounds. We have someone from systems and engineering working with Airbus International Society for System Sciences. We have John from Innovation Management Infrastructure Projects, who's working with Mott McDonald. We also have Beth from agri-food consultancies. We have Gareth working in design at National Archives. Yeah, feel free to continue adding in if you're still left with your introduction. You could also add in your LinkedIn if you want a more wider connection across your network and continue the connections as well. But I will continue to the next section, wherein we just want to gather information about and understand from each other, like what areas are you interested in with respect to systems innovation. So it could be something that you're currently working in, or something that is potential interest, something that you'd like to be a part of in the future. So this will help us understand better the areas which everyone and a community is interested in, and the direction what we could take as well as yeah, just probably again the same, where we could understand potential collaboration opportunities. Just could you start the timer? I think it's not started. Yeah.
Might be, since we're a small group, we could just maybe get introduced. People could unmute themselves. Gareth, are you with us? Want to say a word of introduction? You're on mute, Gareth.
Hi, Josh. I'm actually, as you can probably hear from the background, on the move.
Yeah.
Yeah, but very briefly, I'm a designer at the National Archives and looking to see how to incorporate system thinking as a practice into the way we're redesigning our services. We're a research institute, so I think there's maybe some opportunities there. To be both a sort of arm's length government department and a research institute. But for me, this is quite new as well. So this is a bit of a exploration phase.
Okay, sure. Well, good to have you joining. Maria, you're not able to talk today. Gary, be good to see you here. Good to hear about you.
Yeah, nice to be here again. See you in a couple of weeks in London. So my day job, I work for Airbus Defence and Space. I'm their overall architect for engineering processes, and we're going through a massive transformation at the moment, moving from essentially documentation-based approaches to essentially digital. So yeah, massive cultural change. Got a long history of working with INCOSE, the International Council on Systems Engineering, where they're developing their practice, and they have a I got involved with the International Society for System Sciences about 8 years ago because INCOSE and the ISSS had an MOU where INCOSE were looking for the International Society for System Sciences to provide the scientific foundations for their discipline. I'm currently the president of the ISSS, and one of the things I'm interested in is working towards the scientific foundations for systems thinking and systems practices. Because at the moment we have lots and lots of different frameworks and ideas on systems thinking and systems practice. And if you're going to teach systems thinking or develop systems thinking, which framework do you use? Because actually all of these different frameworks are potentially synergistic. They shouldn't be competitive. They're actually all useful. By understanding the relationship between the practices and the theory, you can place the practices in a context where you can compare like for like and see those synergies. Yeah, so that's one of the things I'm particularly interested in at the moment. What I'm also interested in is helping to promote essentially an enterprise of system science. Just like chemistry and physics, no one owns chemistry or physics, but everyone has some degree of shared orientation. Like the standard model of physics or the periodic table for chemistry. I think we're getting close to the point where we can define a framework for a shared orientation for systems theory and systems practice. Mm. So that's one of the reasons why I love engaging with the SI, because I think you're already doing a huge amount of work towards that enterprise of essentially system science, even though we might not call it system science. Yeah.
Great. Thanks a lot for that, Gary. It's a noble pursuit indeed. It's ultimately where we need to get to, isn't it? Okay, Beth, are you with us?
Yeah, Beth's also shared that today she's on a listen mode. Maybe less. Are you well?
Oh, hi. Thanks. Hello, everybody. I'm afraid I'm one of those today who bounced in late. I'm chair of the board of trustees at the Permaculture Association, and I have a diploma in applied permaculture design. And we, as a permaculture movement, really have a nature-based approach to designing sustainable solutions that are very much aligned with the approaches that you're describing. And I'm here to discover just how you are bringing your approach to systems thinking into the world, which I think is amazing, because we are so nature-based focused. You know, our hands are in the soil, which is you know, there are systems in nature that we are just mind-boggling, and that's what we our design around sustainability is based on nature-based solutions, and there's so much we can share. I don't know whether that's useful, but that's my introduction. So thank you.
Yeah, I was reading a book actually, Permaculture Applied to Social Systems, and I mean it's very similar to all this systems thinking stuff and what we talk about. Are you part of an organization, Les, or?
I'm chair of the board of trustees at the Permaculture Association in Britain.
Okay.
Like the leading accountable body in the world, but it's quite a prominent organization in this country. And we've just revisited our vision, mission, and aims. And we're talking about ethics. It would be interesting in a collaboration based around a shared mission if our visions are overlapping. So,
are you based? Is the organization based somewhere in the UK, or?
The organization is based in Leeds.
Okay.
Although most of the staff are in fact working remotely, and I'm based in London.
Great. Yeah, hopefully there's a chance to catch up and discuss further. So Ron, John, sorry.
Yeah, hi everyone. John Rains. I work for an engineering management consultancy called Mott MacDonald, so similar to Arup, as you mentioned before, designing infrastructure, but also we do a lot of development work in countries all around the world, but mainly infrastructure projects. My role's head of innovation, but I also have an interest because I'm on the ISO committee for the ISO that I mentioned before, so I should just declare that interest. But yeah, great to see everybody.
Great.
Thank you, Sam. I think, yeah, if we could just scroll down to the interest one, we could maybe simultaneously, as we go through the interest, if the last one, I would just introduce the last section where would be good to hear from everyone. What are the potential, where do you see the potential of this going forward? Which would be connecting your area of work, your interest, or in general, and that would be to systems innovation. Or in general, you have any you would see a potential collaboration opportunity. So that would be if you have any ideas how I'd like to collaborate in the development of the ecosystem. If there's anyone who would like to maybe talk through what any potential ideas or any thoughts if they have, feel free to raise your hand or just unmute and start talking. Otherwise, yeah, or you could just add a post-it within that section. But I think in terms just to give to see an overview of interest, yeah, we have interest from system science insights for developing in emerging enabling technologies. We have interest of application of SI in organizational transformation. Also, the systems science foundation for practices. We have nature-based solutions. We have innovation driven by systems thinking, defining and strengthening the relationship aspect, and systems thinking in service design in government. So yeah, I think these were a lot could connect with most of you who've given your introduction and the area of your work. So yeah, I think would be great to see if there's any potential what you see from your interest, from your area of work where there's an idea for collaboration.
Or yeah, you know, ideas about how we might grow this field. You know, that's ultimately what we're interested in here. How do we move forwards with this? I think we kind of know the UK is generally quite rich for this, but we have a long way to go. What would actually be beneficial here? Would it be more ways for people to learn, more conferences, more spaces to gather? Any such ideas, John? Yeah.
Jones, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Some very good comments there. My opinion from what I've seen on developing frameworks and trying to implement them and working across different ecosystems is that it's really important to have the foundational pieces in place first before you try and build. So boring things like a single framework, I think Gary said that's very much support that, a taxonomy for the relationships, the definitions and terminology, and just put those hard yards in. And there are ways of doing it. It doesn't have to be through an ISO. There could be some other areas, and then publish those documents, and they will be absorbed because they'll work. So some foundational things, particularly the definition and the taxonomy around the relationships of connecting parts. That's, for me, is the piece that's missing.
Yeah, sorry, that final bit about connecting the what do you say, arts, did you say? Or
parts. So if you just
Parts,
if you think the system is, parts and relationships within an environment, emergent behavior, you set it up in subsystems, it's easy to define the elements and the things, and you can vaguely connect them by drawing lines. But I think rigor in drawing the lines so that you're creating defined subsystems with specific relationships. Are those relationships one way or two way? Is information flow, or what is it that's flowing on the line? It's easy just to draw a line and say that relates to that. How does it relate to that? And the science behind those relationships. So there's only a certain set of relationships that exist, and putting the work into that. That's the missing piece. Maybe it would be the MECE part of mutually exclusive and comprehensively exhaustive, I think, so that the subsystems actually fit together, and coherence. So those type of things, strong relationships, coherence, and really documenting that. Not sexy stuff, I'm afraid, but I'd say really important to make this fly.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, one example is kind of the relationship between theory and practice. And Gary's talking about frameworks and science and stuff, but then a lot of what I see here in the ecosystem is disconnect between the people who are doing stuff out there and the people who are thinking about the ideas and so forth. That the practice often just kind of vaguely uses the words, doesn't it, and doesn't really understand them, and you're not really getting proper application of them. So I think what you're saying is, how do you actually say, okay, that's systems thinking up there, that's complexity theory over there, this is system dynamics, and that's the practice and so forth, and how do those fit together, and how might they relate? Am I hearing you correctly? Yeah, because then you can get a system, can't you? Otherwise it's a set of parts. I imagine you're arguing.
Well, without a system of systems, if you like, but the foundational piece that you build from, which is terminology and science-based and testing verification.
Yeah, and then people can identify each other and have names, things, and so forth. Yeah. Gary, did you want to add?
Yeah, so there are lots of different flavors of systems thinking. Some systems thinking promotes new conceptualizations, new ideas. Some aspects of systems thinking is applied in terms of creating architectural structures, visions of the to-be. Systems thinking is also helpful in the process of design, which is working out how things are actually going to be done. And then you have systems thinking, which is applied in the realization and the operation of those systems as well. So there is, and when you look at the different sort of like flavors of systems dynamics and operations research, and when you look at all of these, and cybernetics, when you look at all of these different systems organizations, they all have their own individual flavors, which are all again worthwhile, and they all add value. But working out how all of these things can come together as a greater whole could add an awful lot of value, I think.
Indeed.
And there was a mention of Kinefin earlier. Again, I'm a big fan of Kinefin, as a sense making technique, and all of those different flavors of systems thinking and let's say disciplines of systems practice, they can all overlay onto the Kinefin framework as well. Yeah.
And then also about how does this connect with the rest of the world too? So how do you integrate it into all these different areas, whether it's
Yeah.
the built environment, engineering, or public sector, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
all those different applications, and make it accessible for people, and things that they can really use and do stuff with.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're communicating the system thinking in those different domains, you may well have to use a slightly different, more specific version of the language for those particular disciplines. When you're engaging with systems biology, for instance, or biologists, they will have a slightly different use of the language to the language that is, say, typically used within engineering or in social transformation.
Yep.
For instance, the way we use the term complexity is used in different ways across all of these different areas because it has a different purpose in those different domains. So all of this kind of has to be, I wouldn't say unraveled, but at least understood, so that when you're skipping from domain to domain, you're able to switch your language from what's acceptable in one area to the language that's acceptable in another.
Yeah.
Yes, systems
Yeah.
babel fish.
Yeah. And that's why we use, the idea of an ecosystem, because all these parts, these creatures, and sometimes they cooperate and sometimes they compete, and so it's never harmonious, but somehow they manage to work together, So I think that's why we place a lot of emphasis on growing an ecosystem, as a way for these different parts to try and start to have conversations and negotiate their differences. Even sometimes they like each other, sometimes they don't, but over time we try nudge in the right direction, really, don't we? Because we're never going to get something perfect. Okay, Manali, anything you want to pick up on? We're coming to the end of time, but
no, I think maybe would encourage if anybody wants to add later on as well to the potential within the potential section or interest, or you could drop a message as well within the community. But yeah, I think just looking at the time, if we could go to the last section.
Just to pick up on that, like to see events dedicated to collaboration across organizations. Yeah, today's event has maybe see the potential in that, so it'd be great to do more of that in the future. Okay, thanks for that, John. Okay, so we're going to wrap up. Our time's up. Hopefully that was of benefit to you. It's just a position paper to start the conversation, really, and to help us think about this stuff. And hopefully, that's a great idea for a follow-on event, right? One around collaboration across different organizations. It's been great to have you here, Gary, and just, we should be talking more to what you guys are doing also. So definitely be looking at that. We have a conference coming up that Gary was alluding to there. He's going to join next week, right? Next Thursday, next Friday, Saturday, here in London. You're welcome to join. All coming together very nicely. There's a link there if you want to. Actually, Maria is joining. She was the first person to buy a ticket, actually, Maria was about half a year ago. So great to have you joining also. Some of our channels, if you're not familiar with this, we've done a lot of different events and activities, learning series, so on and so forth. You'll actually, the previous conference, we have all the session recordings there on our YouTube channel if you want to see what that looks like and kind of catch up on those. A lot of stuff on LinkedIn. You'll find us here on our website. Okay, this is a bit of feedback that's kind of set up already, a little bit biased, but we'd love to hear from you how you felt the session was. If you want to drag a dot to how you found it, any feedback there would be good. And we'll wrap up and definitely consider, future activities to try and build upon this, to have more conversations, to think about how we can collaborate and work together and over time build this field of systems innovation, and systems thinking and so forth. It's going to take time. We're 3 years into our existence as a hub, but definitely have a long-term view about this. It doesn't happen overnight, but having conversations is kind of key to doing this stuff. So great to have you here today. Cool. I look forward to seeing you next week, to those who are making it, or at future events with the hub. And feel free to reach out if you have any ideas for collaboration. You can find us here, myself and Manali, on the website and send a message. But great to have you joining. We'll post the recording on our YouTube channel and look forward to seeing you at a future event.